program.
What you talking about?
The program. The program. Get with the program.
Everybody clap to this. Say what?
Get with the program.
It starts now.
Hello and welcome to Get With The Program Radio Show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. Get With The Program Radio Show is a multicultural, informative, relevant, and entertaining one-hour weekly show offering you a combination of diverse interviews with questions and comments. And as always, we will act as a positive source of information. Now listen, if you want to be a guest on the show, all you have to do is log in to www.getwiththeprogram.biz. Shoot me an email, leave me a message. You never know, you may have a conversation that we would love to talk about. Or give me a call, 919-255-2757. Listen, today we're going to be joined in conversation with Fernando Bermudez, a man who was wrongfully convicted and wrongfully accused for murder after doing over 18 years in prison and was later ruled that he was innocent. Now, 18 years lost, an incredible time that this man has taken on, but he's with us today, and all I wanted to say is you've been around this rodeo with us one time before, sir, and I'd like to welcome you to Get With The Program Radio Show.
Hey, Gary, it's good to reconnect with you. Good to see you. You're looking great, and I'm happy to say hello to everyone and get this topic of conversation going. Many topics.
Oh,
hello, everyone.
Absolutely, man. I mean, you know, with the way the world is right now, Fernando, a lot of people are getting wrongfully convicted for different things going on. And you are a person that has actually witnessed that, been through it, been through the times of it. We had a gentleman that got out not too long ago in this area here, Mr. Long, he got out, so, and that's not the only ones, there's several of them, but we're going to get right into this thing now. You went to prison at 18 years. You were just a kid. Now, let's go back to the first day that you were arrested. We did this before. I want to hear that story again. Let's briefly revisit that day when the officers came to arrest you and you had no idea. Let's take it back into the zone. We'll go back. We're going to rewind and go back into that time when you had no idea of what was going on. Tell me that.
Well, that's 29 years ago. Such a long time, but it feels like almost yesterday when I still think about the shock and horror on August 6, 1991, when I was just 22 years old and I was about to enter the medical profession and I'm arrested at gunpoint by New York City detectives. And I'm just shocked because I'm brought to the precinct unaware of what I'm arrested for. And I'm held there, unable to go for 10 hours. Toward the end, I find that I'm being charged with murder. And I'm just shocked, man. I'm shocked. I can't believe it. And so I just comply. I waive my Miranda rights. I feel I have nothing to lose because I'm an innocent man. So repeatedly, I continue telling, as I already had been in the precinct, where I was on the night of August 1st. And I know I'm an innocent man. And it seems like just if I tell the truth, I'll go home and go back to my family and resume my hopes and dreams. But that didn't happen.
Wow. So over 18 years and incarcerated for something that you didn't do. So when they picked you up and you went behind the bars, I'm just trying to get focus on this, and you went behind the bars, and when those bars shut behind you, did you think for one moment that you were going to get out?
I thought I would get out sooner rather than later. That's what I thought. But then as time passed and the years would tick by and years would become more years, and over a decade and nearly 2 decades, I really grew into a state of hopelessness at times in which my faith and the love of my family and what I felt was the truth needing to prevail kept me going.
A young man, you were at that time 22, a 22-year-old man, and went to prison for something that you didn't do. Now, tell my listeners, what was the crime that they accused you of?
Yes, sir. It was the crime of murder in the second degree. And it stemmed from an altercation that happened in a nightclub not too far from NYU at the time, New York City being a hotbed of crime in terms of averaging over 2,000 homicides per year in 1991, 1990, 92, etc., due to the crack epidemic and so much. And so I was caught in the mix of this in that I was misidentified because out of that nightclub shooting, teenage witnesses who had been beaten up and so forth were brought to the precinct. and they were illegally, we proved, allowed to identify me in the legal identification procedure, which they shared my photograph. And then the police officers ran with that picture, took that picture, showed it to this who would become the state star witness, another teenager of 16 years old, and he would falsely testify against me as someone I totally was not.
Wow. So I guess I have to ask, when they came to get you and they actually, you knew nothing about what was going on. Did you try to express to them? Did you try to tell them, what are you guys picking me up for? What is this about? Why are you bothering me? Were they trying to listen?
I was telling them repeatedly, could you please tell me why I'm being arrested? And they said, well, you should know. Nobody gets arrested like for a crime they didn't commit or something like that. It was something along those lines as we continued proceeding in conversation to the precinct, because it was a long drive to the precinct. So I just was like, wow, these guys, I'm sandwiched between two burly detectives, and I'm awestruck, man, that they still don't tell me.
Once again, to my listeners, if you're just joining in, we have Fernando Bermudez here with us today. Actually, I want to thank you, Fernando, I'm in the home of Mr. Bermudez. He actually invited me over. Beautiful home. He actually invited me over to do the interview with him. And I'm very pleased with it. Thank you so much for having me here. Now, again, this man did over 18 years of prison for a crime that he did not commit. And later it was proven that he didn't do it and he got out, So, but no matter what they compensate you with, have you fully felt that you've been recovered from that loss in that time?
No, sir. I've been free 11 years going next month. November marks my 11th year of freedom. And I can tell you, I still experience post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms in different ways. I'm still hypervigilant. I still got issues. I still have to take antidepressants, to keep me balanced and so forth and keep me focused on things I need to do. So unfortunately, I'm still going through that. And I just do my best to take it day by day and make meaning of it.
Now, at 22 years old, you still a kid, basically. I mean, people say people are legal at 21. At 22, you're still a kid. Now, at that age, when you went into prison, was this the first time you had ever been locked up ever in your life, incarcerated for anything?
Yes, that was the first time.
So when you went into this prison for the first time at 22 years old, you're in prison with grown men who have more time with you. Were you in maximum? Were you in the highest level? What level were you in?
I was absolutely. I was where you would call gladiator school, otherwise known as Rikers Island, a place where in 1991 had 14,000 detained souls who were there waiting for their trial, just like I was. I was awaiting on the American dream for it to prevail in court and for me to prove my innocence and then go home. But I had to wait on Rikers Island, and that was a horrible place, man. I saw people getting stabbed, getting cut across their face in what's called a $150. I saw officers beating up people incarcerated beating up officers, and of course, people locked up against each other. Never-ending conflicts over the phone and many other things. Now,
at that age, at 22 years old, I'm glad we're having this conversation and we're keeping it real, because we're going to do, actually, to my listeners, this show here that you're hearing now, there will be a part 2 to this because we have so much to talk about. But at 22 years old, you hear people coming in prison. You see the prison movies. When we look at TV and see a prison movie on TV, is that real on TV versus what you went through? Because I hear people say, if you've never been there, you can't tell me about it. What's the difference?
The difference is that in movie depictions in Hollywood and so forth, they pull from the realities of things that do happen in prison, whether it's rape, brutality, depression, suicide, and things like that. But until you actually live it, you don't see it in an ultra focused, technological sound and so forth in your life that is shocking. That's where you're just living. That's the nightmare. And so the reality is that as you look at each exoneree cases of so many that have happened, we have over 2,666 documented cases in 1989. Each one is a horror story, and that's just the ones that are documented. And so there is a difference, because until you live it, you're not going to know the experience. And even documented studies show the grimmer reality based upon the actual statistics of rapes that happen there, suicides. So you have to actually go to the numbers, not Hollywood.
Wow, interesting story. I'm going to take a break here. And when I come back, I want to ask you more about the police officers, because now that in this day and time, we have a lot of police brutality. Police are treating people different. Everybody's looking at the police. And obviously, this has been going on for years. So we're going to take a break. When I come back, I want to know more about the police culture. Were they white, or what was their culture like? We're going to talk about that. Listen, once again, we're joined today and we're having a conversation. I'm on location at Mr. Bermudez's home, and he did over 18 years in prison in Rikers Island for a crime that he didn't do, that he was later freed and was found innocent. But listen, what we're going to do, Fernando, we're going to take a break, and we come back, we're going to talk more with Fernando Bermudez. But first, I got to reach out to my good friend, comedian Grave Digger. Grave Digger, what's going on in your world, man? What's going on in your world?
They have went crazy with this wearing the mask thing, you know what I'm saying? But what I've been seeing, and it makes no sense to me, people, can y'all tell me why you riding in your car with your windows up and you by yourself and you got a mask on? Why are you riding up and down the highway? I had a car wreck today. Dude riding in his car, windows up, mask on, and fainted because he couldn't get no air. I'm telling you. So, you ain't got to ride in your car by yourself with a mask on. Mask is on, you got people around you. So, y'all quit asphyxiating. Yeah, that's a new word I learned. Asphyxiating in your car by yourself with your mask on. Gary, talk to him for me, man. Talk to him. I'll holler at y'all later. Y'all keep listening to my man Gary. It's your boy Grave. I'm out.
Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program radio show. Again, I'm your host, Gary Jones. And listen, today we're joined in a conversation, actually on location at Mr. Fernando Bermudez's home. This was a gentleman who had got convicted for a crime that he did not do. He was later found innocent. The man did over 18 years in prison. He went in at 22 years old as a young man, and he was found innocent and got out. Once again, sir, welcome back to the program.
Thank you, Gary.
Now, we talked about a lot of things here, and now what I want to ask you, now, we know we have a lot of stuff going on with police brutality today, nowadays. A lot of that is going on. And when you were picked up years ago as a young man at 22 years old, what color, what race were the police then? And how have you seen police change from then to now? Have you seen a change in how police officers handle people?
Well, I see a change in that in many instances it's gotten even worse, because now people are getting killed, let's be real, by police officers and other type of just senseless altercations that could be prevented. Whereas before that was happening, no doubt, but at least those who have gotten exonerated can now bear witness to these injustices and help further connect the dots into some of the mentality that happens to cause some of these issues.
In reference to technology, would you say that the cell phones and technology has revealed a lot of things that has been going on in relation to people being wrongfully convicted?
Oh, absolutely. I think we're living in a culture now where, due to the technology, you're able to have greater surveillance and capturing things that can be put into evidence. That's also including people who need alibis if they're innocent, which is a big thing. And also, of course, capturing issues of police brutality and getting the real side of the story through this. Whereas in 1991, when I was 22 years old, cell phones were not being used that way. There was no surveillance in the street. There was not the type of opportunities to prevent wrongful convictions through the use of technology, which can cut two ways, as we see today.
Now, when you went in and did your time at 22 years of age, your family fought to get you out, I'm sure. But when it comes to certain people in the world, if your funds are not right, if you don't have the money to pay for very expensive lawyers, I guess also during that time, it would have mattered, because racism and things of that nature were happening so quickly that they didn't even want to hear your conversation. So when you actually told those police officers that, what are you picking me up for? It just went out one ear and out the other, right? You didn't even resist.
I did not resist. I immediately waived my Miranda rights, because I just felt, I didn't even know exactly what that was, but I just knew that according to what I've seen historically on TV in Hollywood, that if I had nothing to hide, I had nothing to lose by just saying where I was and so forth. But the point is that the culture was different back then in terms of we even had people who were less of color on the police department. The police departments in New York City particularly, they were built on Irish foundations, and they would graduate and include more people. But at that point, it wasn't as spread as it was. And yet, in 1991, my situation was where the Rodney King thing was still happening. And I recall seeing the verdict and so forth, and Los Angeles break out into protest as I watched from my Rikers Island television in a room filled with people who were quite angry about that.
Now, the experience that I look at, and I think, because you have a family now and things move forward in life. At 22 years old, when you went in and you did over 18 years, so something that you didn't do, that of course had to take a mental state, taking you into a whole nother level. Now, as far as protecting yourself when you was incarcerated, were they fights? Did you have to protect yourself? Did you have to defend yourself? I'm sure that there was some different things. And what about experiences for as gangs and then older men in there that you were in there as a young man that had more greater crimes? Because now you're in there for a certain amount of years. But what about someone that's in there for life and they know they're not getting out? So what about protecting yourself? What were some of those instances? Well,
that's a tough situation because immediately when I got in there, I'm 22. And at that point, I'm actually a bodybuilder. I'm 6'2", weighing about 220. And the description of the shooter, mind everyone, is 165 pounds, 5'10". So they already got the wrong guy based on that. But I don't even know all those facts just yet because I'm surviving. So for me, I have to try not to get physically attacked. And at times I do. I do get attacked. I got jumped there. I have to try to prevent myself from getting attacked by the officers sometimes who were quite rough in their handling of people because they just felt anyone who's there at times should have been there or whatever. So they had a bad attitude. There was a lot of violence around me. So I had to defend myself, even upstate. It was a tough time because for me, the main thing was I had to resist the temptation to go even further and in terms of to save my life because I wanted to be an innocent man and I wanted to be proven an innocent man. I didn't want to die in prison an innocent man.
After so many years, when you were in there, after let's say 5 years, after 5 years, did you ever think that you would be released early?
I recall those years, and in fact, that's what I actually thought because by about my fifth or sixth year, I had one major appeal going on in the state courts, I recall, and I hinged a lot of hopes on that, particularly because the evidence was already there of my innocence due to it being hidden, and now we having conducted an investigation years later, but I was denied. So I just got shocked that here I go in another battle. Because once you lose an appeal, it could take years before you get another chance.
Once again, for my listener my listeners that are just joining in today, we are joined in conversation with Fernando Bermudez, who had actually did over 18 years incarceration for a crime that he did not do. He was convicted for murder in New York years ago, and he did time in Rikers Island, which was a very, very hard place to do time. And he survived. Thank goodness he did survive. But he was found innocent after all of those years, and that took a time on him. Now, the justice system. What do you think is the main problem with the justice system with a situation as being wrongfully convicted during that time? We know racism exists, but during that time when you got wrongfully convicted and you in there, what was going through your mind about the justice system?
Well, for me, I still had the criminal justice system in high esteem because I had pledged my allegiance to the flag. I had attended private school up until then for 12 years, and I was hoping to go to college, and we used to pledge our allegiance to the flag, and I just believed that the American criminal justice system would work if I told the truth. But I realized I had to be patient and now wait and go to trial, which was very harrowing and very difficult to wait for in a bad place.
Now, in New York, in reference to that, the justice system, again, what do you think are some of the main problems that were during that time in the justice system? Was it white? Was it racism that put you there? Or was it just somebody that just said, hey, this is just a man that's not white that we just want to put in prison? What do you think was driven behind those officers that just want to lock you up?
Well, absolutely. The evidence that I was able to document, and I repeat again, document, is that first, it was a difficult situation where the police were definitely having a hard time with all the murders that were happening, but that's no excuse for what happened next to me in my case, in that the police officers and prosecutors, we proved prosecutor purposely manipulated the witnesses against me. And so there was a sort of, you would say, atmosphere that certainly was about getting people off the street. They didn't care. It was people off in the 5 inner cities at that point, 85% of which were Black and Latino. I'm Latino at 22. And so I'm snatched up and my alibi witnesses came forward and they didn't care to hear anything. In fact, I was with an Italian alibi witness, and the officer arresting me was Italian, and he told the Italian guy, we documented this, what are you doing with this spick? You know, or why are you hanging out with those kind of people? And suggesting that he shouldn't be, you know, and my friend said, I was with him, I'm going to tell the truth. So we had that type of atmosphere where it was about locking people up, and it happened at a very fast rate, in which the bulk of a lot of exonerations, if you look at them, analyze them, they came from the late 90s, early 80s and 90s and late 80s. You know, that was a time period where the bulk of wrongful conviction cases would come from, if you look at the study, but they continue happening.
What part of the nation would you say that a lot of wrongfully convictions happen? Based on your research, where does this happen a lot?
Yes, well, you have about 3 major states that where most wrongful convictions come from. Texas is one of them. New York is another. Chicago is another as well. Mm-hmm. Those are like the 3 major states. And then, of course, you have differing numbers in different states. But those are 3 large contributors to wrongful convictions and the numbers.
Wow, this is very, very serious. Once again, to my listeners, we're having a conversation. They're actually on location at Mr. Fernando Bermudez's home. He invited Get With The Program radio show here, and we're having a conversation with a man who was wrongfully convicted, who actually did 18 years plus. He was committed and convicted for a crime. He didn't commit it. He was convicted for a crime, wrongfully convicted, that is, for a crime that he didn't do, a murder. He did over 18 years. This man lost 18 years of his time. And I guess the question that I want to talk to you about when I come back, do you think the prosecutors for your case should be held accountable? The prosecutors. Listen, don't touch that dial. You listen to Get With The Program radio show. When we come back, we're going to get to that question. Should the prosecutors be held accountable? Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program radio show. Again, I am your host, Gary Jones, and actually we're on location here today at the home of Fernando Bermudez, a man who was wrongfully convicted of a crime that he did not do. This man did over 18 years. He was convicted of murder, and later they found out, of course, that he was innocent, and he got out, and he is a free man now. And before we took the break, I mentioned that I want to ask him a question about do you think, Fernando, that the prosecutors for your case, should they be held accountable?
Absolutely. In my case, it's undeniable, based upon the ruling and the evidence that the judge gave me in chastising the prosecutor for what he did, James G. Rodriguez, in that he purposely manipulated the witnesses and he cut deals with the teenage witnesses who were mistaken already as it was, but they were incentivized to falsely testify against me. In exchange, their own unrelated charges would be dropped, among other things. So this was a travesty of justice. And in this case, this prosecutor should be held accountable. But unfortunately, we have the situation that prosecutors enjoy widespread immunity, absolute immunity, the courts would say, in that even if you prove such things, that they did such Machiavellian tactics, if they bended the law, if they sent you to prison for a crime you didn't commit on purpose, that they are not liable. And that's a high standard, which in very few instances has been proven. In one instance, in North Carolina, the Duke LaCrosse case, that particular prosecutor in North Carolina was disbarred, but that is far and few in between the cases. What about my case?
Mm-hmm. Because a lot of prosecutors that was involved in wrongfully convicted people, they're still walking free today. You know, they're living their lives, living family and enjoying themselves. And I often wonder, how can a person wrongfully convict someone and then live free and knowing that this person is doing time. When you were in prison and you knew that you were going through this whole thing, did you ever, for once, ever think about committing suicide?
Yeah, I actually thought about that. I actually recall in the year of 1992 when I first went upstate, because after Rikers Island, I was sent upstate because after being sentenced to life in prison, then I became state property. I was no longer city property. I was branded state property and given a number, and I had to wear the same uniform for many, many years. And at that point, just the idea of having that life sentence seemed endless. It seemed like a marathon I could not finish. And I started getting delusions in my cell, and I had a tough time. But finally, through tough prayer, consistent prayer, because my faith in God is what ultimately would get me out of that mess, as well as many others, and guide me to who the person I am today. I did not do that, and I'm glad that I survived to tell and bear witness, because I recall clearly right before I left that particular prison, an 18-year-old, a few years younger than me, had committed suicide right before I left. And seeing his body carried away like that, I'll never forget.
Wow. Now, I noticed the documentation that I did some research on. It basically said that eyewitness misidentification of eyewitnesses is the single greatest cause of wrongful convictions nationwide. Research shows that the human mind is not like a tape recorder. We neither record events exactly as we see them, nor recall them like a tape that has been rewound. Instead, witness memory is like any other evidence at a crime scene. It must be preserved carefully and retrieved, or it can be contaminated. So in your case, basically what we're saying is contamination definitely arrived from those witnesses that supposed to have saw this. So now, with that being said, did they ever catch the real person, or do they ever? Did they know who this person is? Do you know this? But do you have any research shown that this person is still free?
Well, early on in the trial, we were not able to investigate because the prosecutor, he turned over boxes of evidence right when my jury was impaneled, and the judge refused to allow us to investigate the boxes of this evidence. Only until after trial, we began investigating and finding out that the person who I was named at trial, the state star witness having lied against me that way, really did exist. And he was an aerial witness, was actually roommates with the star witness. And that person we found would flee the state and live a life, getting arrested, so forth. The investigation and documented evidence would show, including by the district attorney's office. And yet he was never arrested because all the evidence that they falsely used against me cannot be used against him absent a confession.
Wow. So what I'm hearing, I hear this often a lot in different interviews and conversations I've had. The DA is one of the most powerful people in the justice system, from what I hear, the DA. So the DA was, when we talk about you being wrongfully convicted and you were in for life, was it life? They had given you life?
Yes.
And giving you life for something that you didn't do, and you did your years. Obviously, someone had faith in you. Someone stuck around for you and believed in you and moved you forward. Now, who was that person that had faith in you enough to pursue your innocence?
Well, definitely it was my parents who began immediately trying to get resources because they were in debt already from having paid a private attorney to try to help me. That attorney turned out to be an immigration and divorce, his specialty, not so much criminal. And so I got shortchanged on that. But more than that, my family continued trying to find pro bono attorneys, and they led the way, finding me pro bono attorneys, along with my wife, who I met early on. And she just continued coming to visit me in prison, and she gave me a lot of strength. She returned my faith in God when I lost it, gave me beautiful children when we were incarcerated with conjugal visits and so forth. And so it was those people, it was journalists, it was a homicide detective who retired and started working on my case, pro bono, all these attorneys. I mean, I owe my life, my freedom and what I am and what I do today to many people who I'm grateful for.
That's interesting. It's good to know that family is there for you when you have situations like this, because again, as we mentioned before, a lot of people would say things about being incarcerated or say prison is this, prison is that. But you really don't know until you actually are in that position. So when you were there and you were incarcerated and the nights went by, I'm just visualizing, counting the hours and the days. I guess I'm saying that when someone is pinned down like that and can't go anywhere, you as a man now, you're able to understand the true meaning of time. You understand the value of time. So with that being said, now that you're out, you don't have time to waste. You're making valuable, good decisions moving forward. So with that being said, understanding time and the importance of time, how serious is that?
Well, it was serious enough for me to write an article about it when I was locked up entitled Time Management, which was published in the prison newspaper and will be included in my upcoming book, which illustrates how important time management was for me during my rigorous time of self-educating myself and trying to make sense out of a bad situation. And so I've carried that philosophy that time management is crucial for our management every day. And I don't want to spend time dealing with post-traumatic stress and depression and other aspects that doesn't allow me to be a productive father or husband to my children, one of whom I homeschool here. So time management is essential. Most importantly, it's about giving thanks to God and taking that minute, taking that hour, taking that reflection to think about what it is to be guided and blessed by a higher spiritual power. For me, God.
Wonderful, wonderful answer. Once again, we're joined today with Fernando Bermudez, a man who was wrongfully convicted for murder that he didn't do, and he was actually giving life in prison. And after, of course, he was found out he was wrongfully convicted, he was released after doing over 18 years in prison. That's a lot of time, and that's time that you can't get back. You can't get that time back. Now, when we come back from the break, I do want to ask you, did it change your belief and your religion and your thoughts about God? Because people sometimes, I hear, when their backs are put against the wall, they begin to bow down a lot more and their religion changed. And I want to hear that from you. How close did you get to God when you were incarcerated? Listen, once again, don't touch that dial. You're listening to Get With The Program radio show. I'm your host, Gary Jones. And when we return, we're going to have more conversation with Fernando Bermudez. And the question is going to be, where was your faith and how close did you get to God?
Good day, Gary. Today we're going to talk about facing your giant. The dictionary says that giant is a being with human form but superhuman size, strength, a person or thing of unusually great size, power, importance, etc. Let us first identify what our giant may be so we can face it properly. The thing that may be our giant could be fear. Fear of having certain conversations with individuals due to what they may say or think or even do. Fear of doing something new. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the unfamiliar place. Fear of stepping out of our comfort zone or fear of being hurt. Fear is something that paralyzes us. It prevents any type of movement and gives access to other things like doubt, worry, and even anger. In 1 Samuel 17, David is faced with the challenge of Goliath. David chooses not to fear and face this giant, a giant he never fought before. David chose not to wear armor that he had not used before, knowing it didn't fit or feel right to him. He went forward to face the giant with what he had, which was faith in God. His tools he was skilled to use and experienced from previous battles when he killed a lion and a bear. David moved swiftly and used his sling and his stone, and the giant fell. David ensured the job was complete by then running and standing upon the giant, took his sword and cut off the head of the giant. Let us not forget the tools we use and the skills we gained from our previous battles with our own lion and bear. Even though the giant you face today may be very different than anything you have ever seen before, it's time to face your giant with faith and dismantle the giant of fear. Be encouraged, be victorious. Now go and face your giant.
Hello and welcome back to Get With The Program radio show. Again, I'm your host, Gary Jones. Again, as I said before, we're joined today with Fernando Bermudez, a man who was wrongfully convicted and given life for a crime that he did not commit and was later found innocent. He did over 18 years, but just the fact that someone gives you life is a whole mental thought, But before I do that, I want to say welcome back to the show, Fernando.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Okay. Now, the fact that someone gives you life, and, you know, when I look at the movie with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, and they got life, and just focusing on that, knowing that you're going somewhere for life or something that you didn't do, it would change your spiritual beliefs, you know. And my question is, why you were locked up in a place, a strange place that you only have seen on TV, didn't know these was bars. When them bars locked behind you and you heard those bars click, where was your faith with God?
Well, you know, when you spend over 6,700 days in prison in a 6x9 cell, your mind wanders. You have a lot of time to think, but you're also trapped within an environment where you have to make sense of it. And so your mind wanders. So in the very beginning, once again, I really believed in the American criminal justice system, that it would prevail, and it didn't. But even then, I believed that an appeal would work, and that if I waited that extra year, that finally I'll be home sooner rather than later. But it didn't turn out to be that way. It grew worse from a bad situation, and it ended up being a decade and then more after that, until it turned to over 18 years. But during that time, my faith was tested. In fact, there were times where I felt aimless, I felt broken, I felt desperate. I even hated my life. I even would at times go to sleep with a prayer to God. Not one of just necessarily redemption and always or greater strength, but one of even taking my life. That if God wanted to just not wake me up, I'd be okay with that, because I like to ask the question, why did this happen to me? And so that was a challenge. But today, my life, due to the experience that I felt, has changed dramatically, because throughout my circumstance, there's something peculiar that happened to me. And that was that God spoke to me. No, God didn't speak through me through some hallelujah, no, a ray of light that it was in my cell. Rather, it was through the milestones that were happening in my incarceration and how I looked at the world, how I felt about myself as a young man, a man who even lived in sin, I'll admit. I was no angel and I lived in sin. You know, I was very promiscuous and things like that, dating and so forth. And there was a lot of other things going on. But other than that, my heart was good. And I stretched the imagination to try to make sense as to why something so weird would happen to me. And so God spoke to me through the milestones, through my thirst for education, my love for people and trying to teach them, keeping them out of trouble, and also connecting with my family, getting married when I was in prison, having children when I was in prison, and then coming out with the perspective that was born from that experience. And that was that God felt that I felt that my situation was so peculiar that it had to have a peculiar outcome.
That's a very, very deep message now, because some people in life often go through different changes in life and they give up on God. You know, were there any moment in life where you cursed God and said, there's no God? Why, you know, like you said, why am I here? Did you at any point stop believing that there was a God?
Well, absolutely. I would read the book of Job, for example, and I would just get mad like Job did about everything being taken away. In my case was just my freedom, really. And so I was disappointed and I would get mad. Yeah, I just would get mad. I would feel really, really angry, to the point where I had to stay in that cell and not talk to anybody. That's how angry I was. And I was angry at God. Yes, I shook my fist at God and so forth in anger. And so I felt like that. In fact, I felt like I lost my faith totally when my middle daughter had turned 1 year old and I went to federal court to fight my case. I had been incarcerated about 10 years at that point. So I felt that at least if I could win that case in that court, when the judge had called the witnesses to come forward and so forth, that everything would be different. And then when I lost that, I really lost my faith. And it took me a deep-seated introspection and prayer life and love and support from my family to regain my faith. And when I did one thing. I joined the choir at that point and I started singing in church with a group of men, and we just bonded, and I just fought the next appeal after appeal, year after year.
Wow. Wonderful testimony. So therefore, you know, and we all know that there is a God. You have to keep the faith and believe. Now, with this happening, what you've gone through, as far as what you've gained and what you've learned from this experience, and you have actually written a book that you got coming out, What are you doing now to give back to the community, and also to a message for other young men who are on the wrong path in life? It's pretty much trying to let them know you've been there. You know what's on the other side of those bars. Because there's things that you saw that we're not talking about now. Because you came on the show before, and you've seen murder, you've seen beatings, you've seen rape, you've seen a lot. All these things go on behind those bars, particularly when those lights go out. Let's just take it back when the lights go out, things that you know and you see. What would you want to say to some young men out here today who are doing wrongful things and heading in the wrong direction?
Well, I just say to stay strong and look at my perspective. I went in when I was 22 years old, in the prime of my life. And if you look at the life of Khalif Browder, for example, he did 3 years at Rikers Island. As you recall, I was at Rikers Island, and when he left after doing 3 years from Rikers Island, he killed himself at the age of 22. So I don't want any young life to be lost or sucked into a criminal justice system which won't care about you, will not treat you right, and will put your life in jeopardy. I prefer that you look at my situation and hear my story, and listen to me and hear me speak and feel my pain of what I've gone through to prevent you from going through that, and allow my story to resonate with you, that there is a different way to do things, to think before you act, because there's action for consequences. Just because, for example, I got arrested for marijuana when I was young, a year later, I never thought that I would be in the mugshot books and get arrested for a crime I didn't commit. I never thought that. But just that marijuana arrest changed my life. So think about it. We're living in a difficult time, and I would love to speak to at-risk youth, because that's some of the things that I do, and I tell my story far and wide to try to make a difference with my life, my story, and everything I'm doing today.
Now, I've noticed you have been a motivational speaker, and you have spoke at many places around the world, and you're doing wonderful things delivering your message. Now, how can people get in contact with you if someone wants you to come out and speak at their event, share your story? What's the way to get in contact with you?
Well, Gary, they can get in touch with you with the program, and they can reach me out on social media at Fernando Bermudez Free on Instagram, Exoneree, Fernando Bermudez, and professional public speaker, in social media, connected and so forth. We're developing a website, Apple Seeds for Justice. It's something that we developed. It's all part of a grant that I received for some of my public speaking, because when I came home in 2009, I immediately had to figure out a way to support my family. So I began cold calling and marketing myself as a speaker. And today I've accomplished over 300 lectures throughout America and around the world through this determination. I moved to North Carolina, relaxed a bit, and now I'm ready to hit the road again through my commercial art and other philanthropic works that I'm doing, because the faith that I carried in my prison situation is the faith that I'm carrying today for my life. Even when I'm free and I can do whatever I want now, but it's not about that. It's about doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm. Wow, wonderful conversation, Fernando. I'm so thankful and glad that you were able to invite me into your home. I really appreciate that, respectfully. When I come back, we're going to do a part 2 of this show, and I can tell you it's going to be pretty much right behind this one. The next show, we're going to target and touch on the after effect, post and past. Also want to talk about the day-to-day experience in prison. I want you to take us inside. So for my listeners, the next show, we're going to take you inside of the prison from his day-to-day life, from time he went to bed and woke up throughout those years, some of the experiences, some of the things that he actually saw in prison, and basically how it's affecting you today, because people get incarcerated, and from my understanding, when you came out, the world had changed. It was a whole different world then. I remember meeting a gentleman that did a lot of time in prison. When he got out, he went to the grocery store, and he didn't know that the machines were scanning groceries and different things were going on. So when you did time and you came out, of course, things had changed. So you had to grow all over again. So when we come back on the next show, I want to talk about your day-to-day prison life, from the time you woke up, went to bed, from the food, the things you saw, and how it has affected you now. Wonderful show, man.
Thank you.
Wow. And how's
Thank you.
how's the family? I know I got a chance to meet the wife, and everybody's doing wonderful.
Yeah, everybody's doing great. I mean, we're really quarantined here since March. We haven't come out. We definitely got cabin fever, so much that we bought a cabin out there
Ain't that something?
to escape. And so now we got it, renting it on the Airbnb, and we're making extra money through that, and we're helping to contribute to some charity and so forth through that, through my Apple Seeds for Justice.
Wow, that's right. Thank you so much, sir. It has been wonderful. Once again, join with Fernando Bermudez right here, Get With The Program Radio Show. Thank you, Fernando. Appreciate everything.
Thank you. Have a nice day. God bless everybody.
Thank you so much. Once again, listen to Get With The Program Radio Show. I am your host, Gary Jones. So until next time, keep your head up, stay positive, and remember to
Get with the program.
What you talking about?